And South Africa's situation is very, very similar. But we very much brought it upon ourselves at the policy level, just saying, look, we're going to be very inward looking. And again, it goes back to that thing. We're just going to fish in this one lake, and we're not going to go out to sea. And that was just that was never going to work.
Why is unemployment in South Africa so high? I discussed this topic with Shawn Hagedorn, an independent analyst and strategy consultant, in a recent episode of my podcast, Solutions with David Ansara. For the full discussion with Shawn Hagedorn, you can click on the link in the description below. Enjoy. But I think there's also a separate conversation that we need to have around the regulation of the labor market itself. And I think that that's quite important. We have a very highly restricted labor regulatory framework, the National Minimum Wage Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Labor Relations Act. All of these serve to tighten up the labor market. They benefit existing workers at the expense of the unemployed. So what can be done to try and unlock the labor market and liberalize it some more?
So the labor regulations absolutely have to change. I mean, it's just criminal that people are denied employment opportunities, right from the get-go. And really, we're going down a path where what should be our most valuable asset, which is young people, they're going to be sidelined really, for their entire lives. And it's important to keep in mind, someone who's 20 has never had a job, and even if they're poorly educated, that's sad. We need to get them jobs. But by the time they're in their 30s, it really starts to change a lot. You can take a poorly educated 20-year-old person, and within a supportive work environment, they can develop a lot. Okay, really a great deal. Sky's the limit, or the person's individual limitations are the limit, not the policies around them. So from where we are now, where we're making no progress, I would say to focus on the path of least resistance, and I would strongly argue that there should really be special dispensations, however you want to say it, really protection from all of the anti-competitive, anti-growth labor and BEE and even tax regulations for any sort of young people who are adding value to goods and services. And to shift into that sort of mindset, it doesn't really cost anybody, because we're just missing out on these opportunities. Companies aren't coming from Asia to diversify, to produce goods and services or add value to goods and services in South Africa, destined to Europe or North America. There's none of that going on because South Africa just is not an attractive export destination for adding value to goods and services. And that's what has to change. Otherwise, we have no chance of meaningfully reducing the youth unemployment. And then after a few years, you just create a massive hole in the economy. And I don't think people begin to appreciate how difficult that is to achieve. And we're very close to that. I mean, just another few years. And the damage done is really just horrific. And it'll take a very long time to correct, assuming that, you could even turn policies on its head.
Yes. And as Ricardo Hausman, the Harvard economist, once wrote, that the skills that you use on the job are the skills that you actually learn on the job itself. So it's through working that you acquire the skills that we need. And I think it's quite popular for people to point to the importance of education. And obviously education is really critical, but that's a long-term play. That's going to take many, many years to fix the problems in education. And also there are many millions of people who've already gone through the education system who are now seeking work and need to develop skills that are competitive. So I think this is a really good way of generating new skills in the labor market.
Absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of Ricardo Hausman, and he makes a lot of brilliant points. But I think I'd put that at the top, at least in terms of relevance for South Africa. I mean, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but you take each year, let's say there's a million South Africans who become 20 years old. There's 100,000 of them, I would say, whose education, could have been better. But, if people were entrepreneurial about saying, well, hang on, this person has this skill, this person has that skill. And people wondering, well, what am I talking about? Sort of the a generation ago, suddenly call centers became a big thing. And South Africa participated a little bit, but not a lot. And really, that's just an example. But then, like with 3D printing, the capacity to like personalize products and services, across the globe, as the economy becomes more and more service oriented, becomes much more digital, the distance factors fall away. But really the component you need to bring two things together to employ these people, is you need to have some policy leeway, some carve outs to allow them to enter the global market. And then, you need to have that entrepreneurial verve. And that's not happening. We've got a wall between those two things, and it prevents people from coming and investing in South Africa and mobilizing capital to employ people to integrate within global supply chains, which would create. It's really the only way to rapidly increase employment. I don't see how the economy can avoid really dire prospects without those sort of special dispensations.
Right, Shawn. Well, one of the constraints on our ability to export is, first of all, our distance to market. So if you consider, for example, economies like Mexico, Turkey, they have very close proximity to major markets like the United States and Europe, respectively. South Africa, we're all the way down here on the bottom tip of Africa. And then another constraint is also our ability to get goods to the ports and out onto the sea. So how do we overcome those two problems of distance to market and infrastructure decay?
I do think we need to distinguish between performance, policies versus practices. So there's the policies which just make South Africa, uninvestable for export-oriented activities, value-adding export activities. So, and then there's like the commodity exporting, where obviously, that's the opposite of a digital economy, and that's where you really need to move in bulk. And so obviously we need to do that better, but people should be aware that's not going to create a lot of jobs. And I mean, this is well worth thinking about. Suddenly we sorted all those problems out, and South Africa's GDP was taking off. And kind of like the 5 years you had from about 2002 to 2007, like 5% average annual GDP growth. Well, that helped with creating employment, but we never really did the transformation, and that was never really going to lead to employing the vast majority of school leavers, and that really is the primary success determinant, because we have to transform from a resource-based economy, and really to get our heads around this, all we need to see is what's happened to Russia now. Whether the Europeans and others stop buying the oil and gas, their economy, if you're a 20-year-old Russian with aspirations, maybe on an individual basis, there's still, you can still do well. But as a group, we can be really confident, unless something dramatically happens, that in Russia, change of leadership, and Russia really integrates back into the global economy like it never really has. The 20-year-olds, for the most part, their life prospects will be vastly dimmer than they need to be. And South Africa's situation is very, very similar. But we very much brought it upon ourselves at the policy level, just saying, look, we're going to be very inward looking. And again, it goes back to that thing. We're just going to fish in this one lake, and we're not going to go out to sea. And that was never going to work. That was always going to bring us to where we are now. And that's what has to change.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this analysis, you might want to check out the full discussion with Shawn Hagedorn. That's linked over here. You can also subscribe to my other channel. That's linked over here. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, take care.